Yeah, Justin's a.
We should be
we're
unmuted, and Colin has just given us the indication that the live stream is in place, so that's working. Great.
All right, so we will hand Pro Football Talk back over to WIP for the moment. I think do we have, or does it look like we've got enough to have a quorum here? We do? Oh, great. Okay, perfect. All right, welcome everybody to the March meeting of the Lehigh Northampton Airport Authority. Glad you could all join us. We're going to get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. So that's going to mute everyone, and just remember to unmute yourself afterward for roll call. So where's our flag? Okay. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. We'll go ahead and do a roll call for that.
All right, thank you, sir. Brian Dames. Mike Dowd. Frank Facciano.
Present.
Glenn Bosinger.
Present.
Justin Grimshaw.
Present.
John Hayes.
Here.
Ron Heckman.
Here.
Larry Hemberger. James Irwin.
Here.
Jeff Matskin.
I'm here.
Glenn Friedman.
Present.
Mike Stershik.
Here.
Matt Turk.
Here I am.
Chris Worley.
Here.
And Tara Zarinsky. Here we have a quorum.
Wonderful. Great. Do we have any public comment for today's meeting?
We do not, sir.
All right. We'll move then to the approval of minutes of our February 23rd meeting. I trust that you all had an opportunity to review those minutes in Novus. I'd ask for a motion to approve the minutes of February 23rd as presented. Thank you, Glenn.
So moved.
Thank you. Take a second.
Second.
Got it. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. We'll move then to our treasurer's report. I will make the customary handoff to John so he can make the customary handoff to Todd.
So done. Go ahead, Todd.
Oh, thanks.
Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. Start with the February financials. We always start with the passenger traffic. Again, you can see that we're hovering around that minus 60 level from last year. If you remember, January and February, we were pre-COVID. So next month, as I pointed out in our finance committee meeting, next month, or at least part of next month, we will be in the kind of post-COVID or in the COVID comparison world, and you'll start to see, hopefully, some upticks there. And for people that are in the room, you can see that our parking lot had a few people in there. We always like to see that. Obviously, we're not there. I mean, I also handle the parking. You can see, just to give you an idea, for January, we were about 270 some, roughly. We went up to 400 and some on average, people in the lots every day, and now we're over almost 600. So that number is continuing to grow up to kind of what we expected. We kind of expected things to kind of ramp up. If you remember our budget, we talked about ramping up throughout the year more in that second half, and that's starting to come to fruition. So,
Todd, on the air traffic, are we hearing anything from either Allegiant or the legacy carriers in terms of ticket bookings and things of that nature? Any information coming through in that regard?
I'll let Tom chime in on that part, or Darren.
Yeah, I think, yeah, John, what we're hearing is, again, increased inquiries and bookings and travel arrangements, but we are also, as Todd points out, seeing that uptick now in terms of the number of travelers here and nationally. So overall, I think that the signs have been positive.
I would note, too, that the increase in travel from January to February in 2020 was smaller than the percentage increase was greater in 2021 than it was in 2020. So we saw a bigger bump. We always see a bigger bump from January to February. This year's was bigger than the previous year. There's some silver
I like the
linings, right?
positive stuff, so we're all going to stick to the positive. But again, you're starting to see it. We had our highest traffic level, I think it was last week, and we had that in probably close to a year. So there's some encouraging signs. Next slide, please, for that. Again, this is where we are for the month of February. If you remember, we talked a lot about snow. Snow is a big ticket item for us, and we had we had a pretty good month of January versus budget. Again, I say versus budget because we anticipated some rough terrain for us for the early part of the year, and so our budget for February was 552 in the negative. We came in, despite all the additional snow in February, at negative 450,000. So again, I try not to get too excited because it is a negative number, and I always remember our former chair used to refer to the budget as planned, and so it's hard to kind of get excited when you planned to lose 552,000. But again, these are challenging times, and this is kind of what we have expected, and we're a little bit better than that so far. So you can see one of the areas that really helped us out this month was interplane, going into the planes. Remember, that's kind of how we get our money as far as fueling, and then you're also dealing with the de-icing. So we lost some as far as the snow, as far as managing it, but we also got some revenue in de-icing the planes. So 315,000. I'm going to ask Mike. I know he loves it when I ask him these questions. 315,000 for the month of February. What was our budget for the whole year, Mike?
Before Mike answers, at this point, everyone in the room should know the number.
but Mike's my star pupil, so I want to make sure he's good there. I got to take care of him there. So, all right, for everybody in the room, what's our number?
300,000.
So, there you go. So 315 for just the month of February. And the nice thing, we talked about this again too, we had roughly 82,000 of additional CARES money that we did not have budgeted. Last year we got a little over $1 million in CARES support. We got what they call the top off. We got close to 300,000, and 82,000 of that we used in the month of February. We'll use the residual in March and April. So that's additional to what we had for 3.5 that we talked about earlier in the year that we have budgeted. Next slide, please, for that. Again, this is this year to date. Again, like I said, the plan, I'm going to refer to our former chairman, the plan was to lose 1.1 million. Hard to get excited about that, but again, 670,000 better than budget. And again, these are challenging times, but we are hanging in there, and things are going kind of as we expect, and even a little bit better than that. So we're monitoring it. You can see year to date we're at 328. We didn't have a bad January as far as snow, but again, we had 300 for the full year. We had 328. I don't think we had much of anything in the month of March, but again, you could get something later in the year in December. So again, challenges, but, and I remind everybody that there was a lot of temptation this year to go in with a smaller number for snow because last year's number was so low, and our number, so we stuck to our guns, and the 300,000 was still a little light. All right, next slide. This is our usual kind of operating revenue. You can see what's going on there versus budget. Again, aviation services, you're seeing that with the de-icing and the fueling. Again, good signs. I mean, our recovery is not going to be cutting expenses. It's going to be increased revenue. So that's a good sign for us. And you see that 387,000. Again, that's the stuff that makes me feel a little bit better because I focus on the revenue. We can't do much more on the expenses at this point. Next slide. This is our usual variance. You can see that number at the top. That's just the gross de-icing, 318,000 that we did not have budgeted, so that's better than budget. You can see all that top stuff is all a function of revenue. And then you get down, and we had a little bit more expenses because of the de-icing, but it obviously was a net positive. And then you can see some of the things. Again, that parking revenue is one that I monitor a lot. But again, those numbers are starting to pick back up. Next slide. Again, you can see our top numbers. In traditional years, parking is always far and away numero uno. Last year's number was far and away more than all of that just for parking, but again, challenging times, we are continuing to monitor this stuff, but encouraging that things are starting to improve. Next slide. This is just our cash flow. You can see on here where we are. This is March. Some of the things we just adjust that airline number there, which may change again, but that's where we are at this point. Next slide there. Most of the things that change from month to month is just some of the timing of our capital stuff. That's why it's marked in yellow. You can see the number of 22 there where it talks about the special cares money. We didn't have any real money budgeted for February and March, and that's that additional cares funding that we have. So it's not going to change the dollars overall, but it's going to change a little bit of the timing. And then you can see we're all done with Hangar 11. And on this slide, you can see line 20, $9 million for the sale of land. And I'm glad to report it was how much, Darren? 10.8. So again, I mean, obviously that's restricted money. We have to use it for our infrastructure and some of those, but we got a lot of needs, and it's nice to know that we have a little bit more there. Again, you'll see here on the bottom that our cash flow remains above 60 days, which is what we said after contingencies and after our reserve, who are now through the end of the year. But this is only showing 6 months because I ran out of space after a while. And I think that's it. Next slide, I think that's it. So at this point, I'll open it up if anybody has any questions. Just want to make sure everybody kind of follows it because these are challenging times. We go into more in depth to this stuff in our finance meeting. But again, we understand that these are not the greatest. We're talking about negative numbers, but it's to be expected. And we know things are going to pick up. Our busy time as far as travel is usually in the summertime. We can get ahead of it now, then that gives us a nice little running start as we go into our busy time. Any questions, concerns? Okay.
Just a quick question on the latest round of stimulus, 1.9 trillion. Does any of that find its way to airports?
I'll let Tom, he gives us regular stuff on that, so I'll let him
It
comment on
does.
that.
There was money set aside for airports and for concessionaires at airports. So we don't have any official documentation from FAA at this point on how that's going to flow, but early projections on the numbers are around the $5 million mark for ABE. So we'll continue to look at the formulas, continue to look for additional guidance, but we haven't received anything official yet.
Okay. Any other questions?
I want to thank Todd and the management team for their continued stewardship over the finances of the airport. It's not been easy, and they've done a great job. So thank you, Todd. Thank you, Tom and team.
Thank you, John.
Yep.
I'll move to accept the financial report.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. Second from Tara. All in favor of accepting the treasurer's report as presented, please say aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Treasurer's report is accepted, and I will hand over to Glenn.
You might as well keep standing.
Yeah, that's why I just stood up here. So Beth, can you put up that the discussion sheet, if you don't mind, please? Okay, late last week, you actually on the 24th, right before our committee meetings, we got our financing terms from our consortium, which is 3 banks, Fulton Bank, Fidelity Bank, and People's Security Bank. So they're working with us to do some financing on the connector. So the way it lays out is $15 million that's going to be pure loan, and then there's another $8 million that is grant anticipation. So we would just basically get that money, and then as soon as we get the grants, we would pay that back. So that gives us some time because some of these state grants, as we've talked about in the past, take a little time so we can keep kind of plugging along. So these are the terms. I know we didn't kind of formally bring it to the committee to vote, but this, so you can feel a little bit more at ease, is just the vote for us to continue to move forward based on the terms. Our due diligence, we have to take it before the counties, we have to have a TETRA hearing. There's a lot of stuff. So there's approximately 60 days of us doing our due diligence. There's some financial reviews. There's a lot of information that has to be done. So this is just the board saying, move forward on these terms. And then you'll also have the ability, when we come back before we approve it, to get the final ones before we do the series resolution that says, yep, here it is, and then you can approve it. This is just to kind of move forward on the terms as they were presented. So I'm not going to dig into the terms, but they are reasonable. We discussed them at the Finance Committee. But at this point, I'll open it up to anybody who has any questions.
I'll make a statement for the sake of the board. We did go into detail on all of this at the Finance Committee. We felt everybody that was present, including board members that were not part of the committee, felt that they were very good terms, that we were moving forward in a very positive direction with this, and that we should approve this moving forward. So,
Yes.
I just want to ask a clarifying question. You said that the grant is coming later than the loan, and the grant will pay off part of the loan. Is that correct?
There's two pieces. I'm glad you asked that question. There's two pieces. There's a 15 million. If you look at the top there, there's a 15 million that's basically on a 25-year amortization period. And we're going to pay that. And then the first two years of that is interest only. So that kind of gives us some additional time to kind of build up until things get back to normal while we're in construction, which is pretty normal. And then there's another 8 million that's going to be due when we get to, like, for example, we have a RACP grant and some of these things. So we get a grant, we pay for things, but we're not going to get that grant for maybe 6 months. So this gives us the ability to pay it, and then we'll just reimburse, the loan. We'll pay the loan out of the proceeds from the grants.
So within 6 months, we would pay $8 million on the $15 million?
It's up to 2 years. I just said.
there's a separate $8
If you
billion.
scroll down,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I'm
that,
sorry. There's a separate 8 million. So the first 15 is amortized over the 25. The second
Keep
piece,
going.
yeah, there we go. I'm sorry. I'm glad you're asking the question. The second piece, you see there 5 million for the RACP and then 3 million for the multimodal. So depending on the timeline, that's 2 years. So we'll get the 8 million. And then when we get the grants, we'll just pay them. Obviously, the sooner we pay them, the lower interest that we have.
Right.
So as soon as we get them, so again, we'll have the money in our pocket. And then when we get the grants, we'll just pay it back.
So within 2 years?
Within
Yes,
2 years,
2
correct.
In 2 years, we'll pay $8 million of the 15.
Of the 20.
No, of the 23. There's
The
2
23.
pieces.
Okay.
15 that's going to be amortized over 20, and then 8, so a total of 23. So,
Oh, okay.
no,
I
please.
just wanted to clarify that,
No,
because
please.
I thought maybe the 8 was.
No, it's not part of the 15, but that's a good question.
That would mean we only owed like 7.
That sounds great.
That sounds great.
It does sound great. I like your math. I think some of our bank folks might be on the phone. I'm going to suggest that to them. So, hey, Terrace financing works for me. So, no, thank you.
I thought that was a good deal.
No, I like it, so.
and I think the other piece to this is obviously we're working on, there's no guarantee on the different line item of grants that we've applied for, but we're continuing to work through that process as well. So some of those, what we're talking about here, are applications that are in but not awarded. So we're also working through that as well. So we have a number of grants that are already issued and awarded. We have some that we're still working towards. So
Good.
that 8 million was a very good number for us to provide that bridge during reimbursements.
So if the $23 million loan goes through, we're going to do that, but the $8 million is not necessarily guaranteed. It's sort of in process.
That is actually
That's a really
correct,
good way to
because
sell it.
depending on,
Yes.
we can only have access to the 8 million if we're approved for that one.
Right.
That's
Oh,
right.
so one is contingent on the other, but,
But the first one is not. The 15 is kind of locked and loaded,
Right.
but the second part is contingent on,
If
some
we
overall
receive, for instance, if we get $1 million out of the multimodal and 3 out of the RACP, then we'd take a
get
$4 million loan.
right,
We
right,
wouldn't take
right.
a full 8.
No, I get that part. But the $23 million, you're going to have to go to both Northampton and Lehigh County to get that approved, or, yeah?
I mean, that's my understanding. We talked to bond counsel that we would go to both of them. For sure, he thought we had to do it with Lehigh, but I think we have to do it with both.
Well,
So,
if it comes to Northampton, I'll support it.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
thank you. We appreciate that. But again, to Terry's point, I mean, one of the things we talked about was doing these as 2 separate loans. I know nobody thinks about these things, but I think about the administration of these things. So that's why they're all rolled up into one. So again, that's where we are. Any other questions or concerns? Okay. I guess you got to go.
That is our report, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I would ask for motion to approve the proposed financing terms as presented by Todd.
So moved.
Thank you, Glenn. A second?
Second.
Tara. Okay, all in favor of pursuing the proposed financing terms as presented by the Finance Committee, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we will pursue those terms. Thank you, Todd, for the fine work there and to the committee. We'll move on to the Business Committee. Michael, would you please walk us through these items?
Is he on?
He's not on, okay. And I believe, okay, well, I will just hand it off to Ryan then. Ryan presented these to the Business Committee on Thursday, and we all approved at that point. So if you want to walk us through those for the sake of the committee.
Sure, yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there are three grants that we're looking to accept. We got to do each of them individually, but the general background for three of them are the same. Back in December of 2020, the SARISA, I guess as they're calling it, the Coronavirus Response Relief and Supplemental Appropriations Act was passed. It's a mouthful, that's for sure. It included money for airports, as we were talking about the latest one that was just submitted. All of the amounts for airports are allocated by the FAA, so it's a formula that they come up with. It's 100% federal share, no matching requirement, which we're always happy about. And this one, again, is used to reimburse costs for operations, personnel, combating pathogens at the airport, debt service payments per the grant requirements. So for this first one, for ABE, it's 3.4 million and change. We did submit the grant application earlier this month. We haven't received the actual grant agreement yet, but in order to expedite things, we're looking for approval. And then it goes to the typical grant reimbursement or grant acceptance requirements with our solicitor signing and then Tom signing and getting everything electronically submitted. This grant, I believe, if you scroll down a little bit, so that is 1/12/2021 based on the number formula that they go through. So we're looking for approval to accept this 3.403,177 grant from the FAA.
And we're doing this, we're expecting, what's the timeline on the actual award?
They said quickly, but from what we've seen before, should be within the next 30 days.
Okay.
We should see it come through.
Thank you. And we're going to do each of these independently. So I'd ask for a motion to accept AIP grant 0342001 1/12/2021.
I'll make a
So
motion.
moved.
Thank you. Tara, I'll give it to Tara. I'll give one of these guys a second. All in favor of accepting that first AIP grant, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that grant is accepted. Describe the second one.
Yep. And then the second one is, I believe, 1/13/2021. Again, same act, the CARISA, but this one is specifically for concessions relief of how they allocated the formulas. So for our rental car agencies and our food concessions in the terminal. This one was allocated to $92,953. Again, no local match, 100% federal share, and then there's a formula based on how we divvy out the funds that we have to submit with our reimbursements as the grant calls for. So again, same as the other one we've submitted, we're waiting.
Question?
Just a quick clarification, right? So the FAA is determining a formula for how we disperse those to our vendors?
It's actually not a
Concessionaires.
formula, but they are stipulating how that money has to be allocated based on the tenants operating at that facility and what their minimum annual guarantees are. There's a number of factors that we have to run through that process, and that really determines who gets what portion of that 93-ish thousand
It's an
dollars.
allocation.
Right.
That means you can't give it all to one.
Right, that's what I figured, but I was just trying to figure out how they were gonna dictate
Yeah.
that, since each airport is so different.
It will all be spoken for in every concessionaire, will wish
Right.
they had more.
Right,
Yes.
Right.
I wish they had it all. Why didn't they get it all?
And as we mentioned, the ARPA Act that you brought up earlier, Mr. Chair, that does also have some concessions relief
Perfect.
monies in it as well. So when that comes, we'll obviously be back to the board for that.
Very good.
And as we talked about before in our meeting, these things help us with our uncollectibles. So that makes us feel a little bit more comfortable that the folks can pay us. So it actually does help us.
Perfect. Okay, a motion please to accept grant 113, 2021.
So moved.
Thank you. Take a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of accepting the grant for concessionaires 113, 2021, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and the final of these for Queen City, I believe?
Yep, yeah, and the final is 030-2021, and this one specifically for Queen City. Again, same as the first one for ABE regarding personnel, operating expenses, combating pathogens, same components for 23,000. Again, no local match for that as well.
Okay. I'd ask for a motion to accept AIP grant 30, 2021 for Queen City.
So moved.
Thank you, Jeff. A second.
Second.
I think that was John. Thank you.
Yep.
All in favor of accepting AIP grant 30, 2021, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, grant is, all three grants are accepted. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. We have a number of items that came up during the executive committee that are we gonna hold those for after?
I don't know that's necessary.
We don't need to?
I think we can- Some of them will get into the level of detail.
Perfect.
So-
All right, Darren will detail those for us.
Thank you, sir. So we've been talking over the last probably 6 to 8 months or so about cargo development agreements. Last month, we talked about the fact that we were working on an agreement with Aviation Facilities Company. So we're here with 2 separate agreements to approve. The first one is the Master Development Agreement. Basically what that does, in a nutshell, is it gives them the ability to come in and do some due diligence, some market research, some planning. They'll have about 9 months to come back with a master development plan. That'll be really the really important time for us to focus, is when they come back with that. You know, that'll have a lot more detail into it and everything. At that point, we'll have the ability to approve or we'll reject that plan, which then triggers them going a little farther with that planning and everything, and eventually coming back with an actual parcel development plan where they would turn that into a ground lease. So there's this, and then the second thing we're going to approve is the form of that actual ground lease, which will become an exhibit to this agreement. And that was just to negotiate all of those general business terms of the ground lease up front, so that when it comes time to execute that, we'll fill in the particulars, obviously, with the size and the amounts and everything, and back to the board for approval on that. So the first thing would be to ask for approval on the master development agreement. I'm happy to answer questions on it. Both agreements were in Novus, if anybody had a chance to take a look at those. So,
Does anyone have any questions for Darren?
None here.
No? Okay. I'd ask for a motion then to approve the master development agreement with AFCO as presented.
So moved.
And a second.
I'll second.
Thanks, Tara. All in favor of approving our master development agreement with AFCO, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the master development agreement is approved. And then the form ground lease agreement, which I hope you guys had a chance to take a look at. Any questions on that one? Okay, I'd take a motion to approve the form ground lease agreement as presented.
So moved.
Thank you,
So
Jeff.
moved.
Second.
Thank you, sir. All in favor of approving the form ground lease agreement with AFCO, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the form ground lease is approved. Thanks, Darren. So stay tuned on that one for about 9 months from now.
Yes, hopefully less. but
Yeah.
yes.
Yes, hopefully.
you'll probably hear about a month later.
I imagine. Wonderful. We did form a nominating committee at our last executive committee meeting. I'll turn it over. It did not appear on the agenda, but I'd asked for Glenn. The nominating committee did meet. So the nominating committee consisted of Glenn Geisinger as chair. He was joined by Mike Stershik from Lehigh County and by Larry Hamburger of Northampton County to make a recommendation. So I turn this over to you guys then for a report from the nominating committee.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you indicated, 3 members were Mr. Hember, Mr. Stershik, and myself. Based on the current opportunities and challenges the authority is facing and being acutely aware of the larger challenges to the airline aviation industry as a whole, we needed to fill Mr. Rosenberger's position as Lehigh County representative, and these are the tasks that we were that we had to fulfill. All officers, after debating it and considering all the pertinent items, we determined that all officers currently seated should be retained in their respective positions, and Mr. Stershik should be the Lehigh County representative moving forward. So our recommendation is Mr. Matthew Turk as chairman, myself as vice chairman, Mr. Hayes as secretary treasurer, Ms. Zirinsky as Northampton County rep, and Mr. Stershik as Lehigh County rep. And that is our recommendation to the board.
Thank you. So I believe the next part of that is for the board to consider that over the next 30 days, and we will then have a vote at our reorganization meeting in April, at which point anyone may nominate folks from the floor, correct?
Correct. There would be a nomination. Anybody wishing to run not on that list would need to be nominated from the floor by another individual, seconded by another individual. And then we would have a vote accordingly.
Thank you, sir. Okay. We will move on to Tom's director's report.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as we covered, traffic for February down about 63%. But, again, continuing to see some good signs. TSA's national checkpoint throughput month to date for March is up about 5% over last March. So as Todd was sort of alluding to, we're starting to see now, comparing pandemic month to pandemic month, we're starting to see that increased travel. We're still about 50% below 2019 levels in terms of passenger travel, but certainly an increase from where we've been. In terms of what we're seeing here locally, we are up as well about 5% in terms of our throughput at our checkpoint. And what was nice to see is this past weekend we had, for the first time in over a year, we had over 1,200 people per day going through our checkpoint. So that's been a while since we've seen that level of activity. So that was really great to see. Maybe in some small part that's as a result of vaccinations. I'm not really sure, but at this point we're seeing about 16 or 17% of Lehigh and Northampton County residents fully vaccinated, and that continues to grow. So we're encouraged there. Since our last board meeting on February 23rd, had a couple of things to follow up on. On Friday, February 26th, we did issue number 5 of our GA Today newsletter. That was distributed. Thursday, March 4th, we had 2 different items to report. Delta's second daily Atlanta flight resumed, and United's Chicago service had resumed as well. The following day, on March 5th, Allegiant's Savannah, Georgia service resumed, so that was nice to see that come back. Monday, March 8th, Miller Keystone had a blood drive here at ABE. We collected 14 units for our local blood bank. And let's see, March 10th, Queen City Airport was featured in the Aviation Council of Pennsylvania's Airport Spotlight, so that was distributed statewide, and we got a lot of great feedback on the write-up on Queen City. On March 12th, I guess not to be outdone, Braden wanted to make the news, so we had approximately 80 Pennsylvania National Guards troops from the 189th Infantry Charlie Company picked up at Braden. And they were all picked up there with a Chinook helicopter, transported to a training exercise. So that was pretty neat. Saw that in the local media. And on March 24th and 25th, the Airport Authority participated in Morning Call's virtual career fair, their job fair. And so we had some opportunity to talk to some folks interested in a career with the authority. In terms of upcoming events, on April 12th, Delta will be scheduled to resume their 3rd daily Atlanta flight, so we're looking forward to seeing that. On April 15th, which used to be tax day, Allegiant's Myrtle Beach service is scheduled to resume, so we'll see that back. And based on April 15th, then, all 8 of Allegiant's nonstop destinations will be back in service here.
Was Myrtle Beach and Savannah, those were seasonal anyway. So are they resuming later than they normally would have?
Actually, a little earlier.
Earlier, that's what I thought, yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
And last, certainly not least here, we've talked about this in some of our updates, the triennial, the every 3-year full-scale emergency plan exercise required under FAA certification requirements. We finally have on the schedule, right, Steve? We've got that set up for Saturday, April 17th. Still looking for some volunteers, I think, for that event. If people are interested, they can talk to Steve. It runs from 7 a.m. to 12:30 or so in the afternoon. But great way to be out at the airport in the early morning. So if you want to run by, we can certainly incorporate some volunteers there. But that'll be Saturday, April 17th. So a big exercise here, and certainly with the pandemic, I know this has been challenging to coordinate, but appreciate all your work and the team's work to get that on the schedule, Steve. So I think with that, that concludes my report, Mr. Chair. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone have any questions for Tom? Other than what would how does a runner fit into the emergency exercise?
Oh, it could be. I mean,
But, yeah, we're looking for volunteer victims, so that kind of, you can expect job duties rolling around in the mud, playing some sort of injury.
That sounds like Todd. I mean.
maybe we need to call up the National Guard for this one.
There you go.
I don't know. Okay, so.
We could blow something up, you could run away from it.
I don't think we're gonna do that. Thank you, Tom.
Absolutely.
Judge Friedberg, would you please provide us with a solicitor's report?
It's a reminder, of course, the monthly reminder that the financial interest disclosure form is required to be filed by May 1. So that's date is approaching. I'm available and my staff is available in case there are any questions. If you have any issues that you need some help with, reach out to us. But that report has to be turned in copy to Sylvette no later than May 1. That's for all board members who served last year, including, of course, the board members who have left but served last year. And I know Sylvette has reminded them to do that. With regard to the work of the solicitor's office, I can report that during the past month, there was an argument on a motion for reconsideration on the terminal connector litigation in Lehigh County, and I think we'll get into that during an executive session in a moment. We've also worked on redrafting a contract for the fuel tank installation that is part of our arrangement with World Fuel. The Rockefeller land transactions were completed just last week. We conducted a review of the runway 624 project, the bid documents, so that was reported back to Ryan. An ethics opinion was issued, right to know requests were dealt with. An opinion was issued to Matt McConnell with regard to competitive bidding and the fact that there is no need for competitive bidding with regard to the possible sale of real estate. At the request of Matt McConnell, preparation of an agreement with regard to drone storage at Braden Air Park is underway. The Avis agreement was reviewed as requested by Matt McConnell. The right of entry agreement with regard to Queen City has been passed on by us as well. So it's been a fairly busy month, and we can get into more detail about the pending litigation in an executive session.
Thank you, Judge. And if everybody completes their form before April 27th, the judge will not have to remind us to do it at the next board meeting. So a little incentive for you. Do we have any new business before the board? We do not. I would then ask, we have a couple of items that we do need to take to executive session. Judge, could you describe the nature of those items, please?
Well, the one that I know about and am directly involved in relates to the pending litigation in Lehigh County relating to the terminal connector project. We submitted a report to the board, and we had a full discussion on that during the executive committee meeting on Thursday. I would like, there were some members of the board who were not present for that executive committee meeting. They were not required to be. They're not members of the executive committee. So for their purposes, we will have a executive session to report on the status of that litigation. I don't know of any other request for executive session. Are there others?
No, I believe this was a carryover from the executive committee agenda, and I think we resolved the real estate matters. So this will be simply an executive session for purposes of discussing litigation matters.
Okay.
May I have a motion to enter into executive session, please?
So move.
Whatever you might be doing, and we'll see you all in April. Take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make
So moved.
So moved.
We're adjourned.
Okay,
Thank you
thanks,
all.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Move along.
We still